subscribe and leave a comment below. r/AskReddit. Female inmates, how do you think your prison experience was different from what you have heard about male prisoners' experiences? Less dong. More ming. I can actually answer this speaking factually correct according to PA Jails. My BF and I were both in prison at the same time when I was 19 for narcotics. I was met by two females I knew who gave me extra socks and helped me find comfort while awaiting sentencing. I was scared to come out of my cell and read mostly, but they helped me feel not alone. The woman played cards and watched cops mostly, staying off in their own groups. My BF at the time did not get such a warm welcome but was met by another male he knew to help him as well. From what they both tell me, there was immediately a sizing up that happened with some of the guys where they had to talk out of a fight. The men were hostile and rude to each other's cliques. They too played cards and watched TV but not quietly together like the women. And a lot of punking or shit talking day in and out. Edit for grammar. Well, for one thing, male inmates don't get their hot dogs served chopped up into little pieces. Crafting hot dogs is a skill worth a lot of cigarettes. I spent 6 months in prison in MO. Just got out a month ago. I'm not exactly a hardened criminal. I just ducked my life up for a while and paid the consequences for it. In my experience, the women I was there with were really nice and surprisingly supportive. The biggest fights drama were over girlfriend stuff, and I can confirm too, there were tons of gay for the stay situations, and over girls having money put on other girls' books and having that go south. I've talked to enough male prisoners to know that the biggest things that seem to be different are the sexual assaults, level frequency of violence, and the gambling. Sexual assaults happened in the camp I was in, but seem to be less prevalent than what I've heard of men's prisons. Fights were usually less ferocious, not always, and farther between for the women's camp, and while a lot of girls still gambled, they were less into it, and usually had lower stakes than the men seemed to be. And although we worked out a ton at rec, the prison I was in had exercise classes and most of the girls did those more than the lift heavy get ripped approach. We used to joke that men go to prison and get fit. Women go to prison and get fat from canteen. Those noodles will get ya. Throwaway account because I post semi-identifying stuff on my real one. And most of my friends don't know I went to prison. I visited the largest female prison in a state in the southeast US. The women got new release DVDs every Tuesday. They had a service dog that was supposedly there to help like 3 of the inmates put their shoes on. They had a full kitchen and were cooking up a storm when we went through. They had access to a ball sport of some kind, and I even learned about banana trees from a couple of them. LOL. It wasn't just the minimum security section either. That was the prison. We also visited death row though, like 8 women. They didn't have access to the stuff I described, but their cells rooms were like little apartments, fridges, TVs and all. I spent 9 months inside a women's county jail. Never went to prison. The women constantly walked around and talked to each other. I heard cos and volunteers that this never happens in the men's units. There are no men walking the yard laps, chit-chatting. They sit, they gamble commissary over card games. That's it. Most of the commissary they get they don't even eat, just gamble with it. In the women's unit, we also made each other jailhouse birthday cakes and cards and passed it around for everyone to sign. I heard this doesn't happen in the men's unit. Makes sense. The female jail has a lot more gay for the stay. I would think it's more acceptable there. My mother was an inmate at a local prison and she tells me stories if I ask. She says women still like to take care of themselves in prison. Shaving, makeup, if they can afford it make it, grooming, etc. There was one woman in particular that she will never forget. She was trimming her labia hair with some small blunt children's scissors she had. She ended up chopping a flap of her vaginal skin off. Blood everywhere and screaming like she's never heard before. She was thrashing all over the showers, clutching a good chunk of flesh in hand. And to this day my mother insists on going to get her PSSY waxed by a professional. Story scarred me LMAO. I've supervised both a male and woman's jail, multiple jails in fact, so I can speak from the perspective of responding to the emergencies and dealing with all the problems that come up. Men are violent and use drugs often. They are more likely to get drunk on Pruno though. Fights are more organized for the most part. Race gang rules predominate most of the fights, so it's more controlled in the sense of a referee being present, being in a designated location, and authorized by the heads in the house. When someone goes down to the ground, the fight doesn't resume unless they get back up, or they are a chomo. There's no rules on how bad of a beating chomos get. Fights are usually more about breaking a rule, owing a debt, or disrespect. Assaults happened on staff, but generally, inmates know that brings heat on the house, so more searching for contraband, missed visits, and pissed off officers to deal with it, so most will get permission from their head before doing so, and females are most definitely off limits without an extremely good reason. I've had multiple inmates rush another inmate they thought was going to hurt me. Women have some informal structure amongst themselves, but it's not too strict. Anatomically, it's much easier to smuggle drugs in, so you have more overdoses going on than drunks. Fights tend to be more like high school. More gossip, more heat of the moment passion. No referee means no one is playing lookout or stopping things before someone gets seriously hurt. Chomos and child abuse are more tolerated. Females will hit officer without a second thought, and I mean vicious. Multiple fists to the face, drag them by the hair, MMA move fights, and on the debate when it comes to hygiene. Male housing units tend to be cleaner than individual hygiene. Females tend to be cleaner on an individual basis than their housing unit, I suspect because of the informal structure amongst females. I think so. The prison I was in was men on one side and women on the other, so the van ride from court was shared, and a couple of the lads gave me a few warnings that women were worse and they felt bad for me. That really made me feel confident going in. On the whole, where I was, most of the women were in for drug charges, mainly addicts themselves. I was in for financial stuff, so I kept out of most of it. There was a lot of sex, a lot of self-harm, and I mean a scarily ridiculous amount. Pretty much consistent backgrounds of poverty abuse. Most were fine, some just horrifically scary. We had one nonce come in and she was not treated well. The worst thing was one of them grassing a couple of the others up. She was injured both externally and internally with a chair leg. That was rough shit. I then got shipped out to a foreign nationals prison where 80% are waiting to be deported to their home countries. They kept 20% nationals to basically run the place. That was different. Either women used as drug mules by their pimps, dealers, or full-blown gangsters. Not much in between except for a Muslim lady called Latifa who shared her dates with me that she had for Ramadan. I, too, have spent time in prison. I have been out now for 10 years, but I was in for 32 months. Female prisoners set up family units. There will be a husband, dad, wife, mom, and children, etc. These family units, in my experience, are mostly platonic but at times are centered around a pseudo relationship. There are a lot of gay for the stay women, but I would imagine that is the same with the men. With women, you don't typically see the gang violence, racial divides, or violence against those in for sex crimes unless that woman is a predator type offender. What you do see is prejudice against those who kill, abuse, or abandon their own children. The women serving time for those crimes generally need protective custody. In my opinion, women can be petty, mean, prone to drama, and just in general difficult to get along with. Put 80 or so women in one open style dorm setting and the bullying and constant drama will ensue. I have never been so thankful for silence as I was the day I finally got home. I live in the US, so I would be curious to know if any other country has different experiences. I've never been to prison, but I know someone who has. She said that women prisons had fewer visitors, that it was harder for the women to have men stay and support them, but it was the complete opposite for men. They always had visitors and women who would send them money. It's a common hustle for male inmates to try to hook up other male inmates with a female on the outside, like a mother, aunt, sister, etc., for favors inside. Okay, as apparently the only actual female prison inmate on Reddit, it is much different than male prison. I was in prison for 2.5 months last year. My ex was in prison for 16 months. In women's prison, while there is still violence, there's less violence, and it's usually over girlfriends. Men's prison has major race gang activity. Women's prison really doesn't. If anyone acts in a racist way, they're getting the shit knocked out of them. Rapists and child abusers get the duck knocked out of them in both male and female prisons. Absolutely nobody tolerates that shit. There's a lot more gay for the state type shit going on in women's prison. But for the women who are fully straight and not interested, that's mostly respected. Yep, you'll still have some disrespectful hoes acting like men, hitting on you and trying to convince you to give them a chance. But as long as you're firm about your boundaries and not being interested, they'll back off. Women are just as catty in prison as they are outside of it. But it's a little worse, because almost everyone that's in prison has had some kind of trauma abuse in their past that affects their mental health and makes them act in ridiculous ways, which is how they ended up in prison in the first place. There are a lot of trans men and women in there, and I don't really know how it differs from men's prison. I didn't ask the ex if there were any trans women there, but at least in women's prison they didn't keep us separate and everyone was completely cool with it. Nobody got harassed. Honestly, it was really chill. You just have to be respectful of other people and their property, but also not trust anyone and keep your shit locked up because you're in prison. Edited to add. I've already directly thanked the kind anonymous people who gifted golden dudes, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who has responded and been so incredibly kind and not horribly judgmental. I almost deleted my comment immediately after submitting it, but I'm so glad I didn't. I've appreciated the questions from people just trying to learn more and understand better. I'm grateful to my fellow ex-cons who have given me hope. My heart goes out to anyone who has been in the system or had loved ones who have. I appreciate the COs in here who treat the inmates like human beings. I guess the main thing I want to say is, our judicial system, USA, is very flawed and needs some work. I don't want to get political because I hate politics, but what I will say is our system needs reform. I don't know exactly how. I don't know what's possible, but it's ducked up as is and needs a reboot. I ducked up and accepted responsibility for my actions, but there are so many people in prison who just need better mental health care. There are just a lot of traumatized, hurting people out there making dumb mistakes when all they need is a little help. Just try and have a little empathy and compassion for your fellow idiots. Red Heart. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comment.